and who's been in great form on the horses. I think she's had to put up with a lot here, and I think she's probably done something that's quite brave. Again, I'm not trying to preempt the case. You can make a case for Robert Dunn in terms of what he's trying to say in some respects, but it's brave what Bryony has done, and I'd like to think that the weighing room in general isn't a sexist place. The world is sexist. In some respects, that's the way it is, but I think in racing that we should be very proud of the prevalence of female jockeys. And I just canvassed 2 female jockeys today in Ireland, and both said they've no issues with the weighing room whatsoever. But Bryony Frost definitely did.
I guess the point is, Johnny, they wouldn't say it if they did. That was my takeaway here from what Bryony Frost was saying, that there had been incidents which she describes being perpetrated on other female jockeys who were laughing along with it, which is kind of how this worked. This is how it worked in the 50s and 60s when workplaces were sexist, and it still works that way. And your point that sport reflects life and is a reflection of life is true, right? But we do know in any male-dominated environment there has been a strong, aggressive protection that didn't really want women interfering with their business. And I think racing frequently pats itself on the back about the great job that it's doing for equality. And sure, on the horse, it's if you can win the race, that's what all I'm looking for. But the numbers need to improve rapidly, and it doesn't seem like the weigh room is the beacon of equality that it has been held up to be. That's certainly what my takeaway this week was, that racing has a good distance to go before it gets to the point where it can actually honestly say that it is a safe, nurturing environment, irrespective of what it is you are.
Yeah, and I don't want to be just saying this is an Irish versus British thing, but Bryony's issues here were based in British weighing room. So I would hope. I know what you're saying.
Where is he from? Where's Robbie from?
And
look, I don't have any inside knowledge of any weight room, but it seems like this happened, and there isn't a slew of good Samaritans along the way who are stepping in to say, hang on a second now, that's out of order. If they were policing it themselves, they did a bad job policing it themselves, and it turns out it shouldn't have been left to them to police themselves. And so
I agree. I don't ride in the weighing room. I think that was the most damning aspect of it, was that the challenge facing Bryony to get to this was great, and she may have suffered because of this. There's anecdotal evidence that she's lost rides because of this. And that's what's a problem for me. I don't ride in the weighing room. I asked 2 female jockeys in Ireland off the record, and I believe that they gave me genuine answers. And I think I can only really speak in terms of the Irish jockeys I know, and I think there's a great relationship in general there. If you go into the weighing room as a young lad or a young lass, it can be quite an intimidating place. And in general, the feedback would be that you are looked after, and that's it's a very, very dangerous sport, and you are looked after. But sexism is everywhere, Ger. Racism is everywhere, whether we like it or not. I think we're all a little bit racist, we're all a little bit sexist, whether we like it or not. That's the way life is, and maybe there is more than I've acknowledged in the weighing room. But I hope that it's not as bad, and not a bad place to be a girl going into aspire to be a good jockey, because we will need them in the sport, as you say.
Yeah, and look, that's the point about a case like this. And it was interesting to me over the last couple of weeks that there seemed to be a circling of the wagons, as opposed to an embrace of Bryony Frost, and the fact that ultimately, in retrospect, this is going to be a whistleblower case, right? What Bryony Frost is doing is spitting in the soup. And we know that the people who spit in the soup get punished for it. And I really hope she isn't going to be punished in the long run. Like you say, there's anecdotal evidence. I think somebody's done the stats. There's actually empirical evidence that she has suffered as a direct result. She's getting fewer rides now that she's gone public with the allegations than she was getting before. And that is a plague on the house of British racing at the moment. So I think that it'll be very interesting to see. Racing needs to embrace this story and say, actually, you know what, if there are lessons to be learned, let's learn them, as opposed to saying we're great. Because
I think I think as well, John, we all need to look at ourselves from the reading of this and say evil happens because good men stayed silent or good women stayed silent, and that's what's at the heart of this. A lot of things happen because people didn't step in, and you may not have been the perpetrator, but you may have seen it happen and did nothing. You may have gone home and thought, maybe I should have intervened, but it's easier not to do something, and that happens to us in all walks of life. And what Bryony does in terms of racing at a time when racing badly needs, I think, good publicity. What Bryony and Rachel Blackmore do for racing is off the charts, like off the charts. So like we really need to value female jockeys, and we certainly need female jockeys not to be afraid to be in a position to come out and do what Bryony did.
Yeah, one other thing you pointed out about how difficult and intimidating it can be. It definitely seemed like one of the undercurrents of this was, sure, it's grand, we always bully the kids. I think back to, was it the Class of '92 documentary where Paul Scholes talks about being placed in one of the big dryers, and it's like that's how it was grand, you know.
And the Wimbledon documentary as well.
Yeah, so like a culture of bullying pervades in sport because it's a macho environment, and that's how you. But like we know that's all bollocks. We know that doesn't work. Like that actually stops people having good careers. It prevents them from being their full selves, and we need to stand up against that. So that's the other aspect of this, that hierarchy where you're allowed to do certain things that other people aren't allowed to do, even though you're both being paid the same to be there and you're professionals competing against each other. Something needs to happen where there's self-reflection on that, and that gets nipped in the bud.
I just like to just put racing though into a bit of a more favourable picture here. If you're a jockey in an Irish weighing room, for example, and you ride for the likes of Jessica Harrington, or you go back to a yard where it's 50-50 split between women and men, like, to me, sexism is not a big issue in racing in that regard, and that like the top trainers are frequently women. It's 50-50 split in terms of staff. The banter between both goes back and forth. Like, obviously there are less jockeys, but like I do think there is a tolerance there, and like it's not a situation where women are looked down on coming into the weighing room. I certainly hope that to be the case.
Why are there less jockeys though, Johnny? Why are there less jockeys? If the apex at the top of the tree, the best job, if everybody's riding out and the aim is to ultimately, you know, be the winner of the Grand National that everybody dreams of, then if it's 50-50 the whole way through, but actually the good jobs get picked by more men than women, then there's something wrong. There's a blockage there, and I would argue that largely it's a historical thing, right? And you need to overcome that, and there needs to be some affirmative action taken on that. But you're not going to get affirmative action if Bryony Frost is coming out and saying that Robbie Dunn took his towel off and shook himself at me.
Yeah, I think racing's going to have a long look at itself after this, and this has been a great thing that this is out in the open, because the Gibbons case, Ger, is not good either, and I think good will come out of it.
Okay, let's talk about that, because a lot of people probably haven't even seen it's been knocked off the back pages by the Bryony Frost story and everything else that's going on at the moment. But what happened in that instance? So
Graham Gibbons was riding in a race along with Freddie Talitsky back in 2016. Now time really flies. When Freddie Talitsky suffered basically an injury that's left him paralysed and obviously ended his career, and he's been a really, really good promoter of racing on Sky Sports Racing ever since. But Freddie Talitsky is basically making a claim that it was essentially careless riding by Gibbons that caused the incident, and there's been back and forth in court over whether this was careless riding or not, but this is a line straight out of the Racing Post this week. Graham Gibbons' breath smelled strongly of alcohol on the day in 2016 that horses ridden by him and Freddie Talitsky collided at Kempton. Jim Crowley told the High Court on Tuesday. Jim Crowley is one of the senior jockeys in Britain. I mean, where do we go from here with this?
Yeah, like sometimes we see breathalyzer tests and jockeys being stood down. This is why, isn't it? This is why that they were introduced. It's like, yeah, you need to make sure that the safety of all the jockeys is paramount. And again, it's an ongoing case. We don't want to jump to any conclusions yet until the decision is formally announced, and you're then much more free to talk about these things just from a legal perspective, if anybody's wondering why.
Yeah.
But like ultimately,
it was in the court, so obviously we can relay what was said in the court, and Jim Crowley said it was quite a common occurrence.
Right. That's pretty grim, isn't it? And
it's grim. It's horrific. And Gibbons is obviously fighting his case. Freddie Talitsky, it could have been worse what happened to him. He could have died. And, this is a horrific case. But I've no reason not to believe Jim Crowley on this. And I just hope that a just conclusion is drawn here, because it's horrific what happened to Freddie Talitsky. His career ended, his life could have ended. And, the accusations are incredibly serious. Okay,
we'll cover that story again when it comes to its natural conclusion in the coming days and weeks. This is Friday Night Racing here. We need to talk about what's coming up at the weekend. There's a long-held belief that if you're a tennis purist, that you don't really want to go to Wimbledon in the second week. It's that kind of bridge between the first week and the second week when it's quarterfinals days. It's that weekend where you get men's and women's action, because actually you get to see all of the best players playing at the same time. It feels a little bit to me like this weekend is one of those weekends where everywhere you look, there are absolutely sensational races happening.
It's insane. Like, you know, it was great to have in these times of horrific climate change and good ground in Navan in November. It was great to have Nicky Henderson just be Nicky Henderson and essentially ruling two big horses out of big races at this time of year and pissing everyone off in the shape of Tingle Creek, obviously, with Shishkin and Champ at Aintree. But despite the fact that Shishkin doesn't go to the Tingle Creek, we have Nubia Negra taking on Shakin Poursois. And then at the weekend, we have Allaho taking on Envoi Alain. And this is like Cheveley Park, who have been unbelievably good for jumps racing, running two horses that ilk against each other. And I've no reason at all to think that they won't. Often you see like other owners would run horses against each other in the race car, but you know they're not going to run. They'll come up with some excuse. I've no reason to think this won't be the case. And we've really good racing at Cork as well. It's quality from Navan in Ireland tomorrow to the main meetings in Britain over to Sunday, and it's December, and it almost feels like racing is just starting with a bang this weekend. And Sean Flanagan would love to be there, but I'm sure he's buzzing for it nearly as much as the rest of us.
All three of our Tote 10 to Follow stables now have points on the board thanks to Honeysuckle, which even I managed to pick correctly, who won the Hatton's Grace hurdle last weekend at Fairyhouse. Johnny, you are well out in front with a 40-point lead, very early days. Danny Mullins is in second, and I'm just 10 points behind him on third. The likes of Appreciated, Allaho and Fernie Hollow are down to run at Punchestown on Sunday, so we could be looking at some very different scores next week. You can bet on Punchestown and all of this weekend's racing on tote.ie, home of the Tote Guarantee. Now, I am delighted to welcome back to the show Sean Flanagan. Oh, we don't have Sean. Oh, we're going to be there in 2 seconds. Right. Well, let's talk about some of the racing this weekend, Johnny, in terms of what you expect to happen. Again, interesting to see that some high-profile Irish horses going to England. Again, we had this conversation with Henry de Bromhead just last week about, you know, feeling confident about going over there. The Tingle Creek, I didn't realise Sizing Europe had actually won it in the past, so it's not like it's entirely a new thing. But Moscow Flyer had a great record in that race as well. Talk to us about the kind of context of this race with regards to the rest of the season.
It's obviously disappointing that Shishkin isn't there, and you know this is an argument you could come down like either side of in terms of Nicky Henderson wussing it out with his horses. I'm personally of the view that a horse does not need to be 100% to run. Clearly horses are not always 100%, you know, they come on a bit from a run and so on, and if you were beaten this race, so be it. You know, it'd be great for the race, but in any event, you know, I think Moscow Flyer's victory over Zertia and Well Chief in this race, God, how many years ago was that? What would it be? But maybe 2004, 2005, if I can find it here. I won't find it, but I think it's many people's favourite race of all time. It's definitely up there with me. And this year's renewal with Shakin Poursois coming back from his unbelievable performance at Punchestown, where he hammered Nubia Negra. Nubia Negra began his season winning very well in the slower chase at Cheltenham. And they're only two of it's only a 5-runner field, but to me it looked like it might be less. We have Grenadine as well, obviously running for Bryony Frost. That'd be a great story. Bridget Andrews as well, flying the flag for the women this weekend. She's a very good ride on the other card. This is a cracking race, and Willie Mullins had a really quiet November, which is habitual for him. He doesn't tend to run his horses until kind of coming into December, but he is hitting back with a bang this weekend. Kilcrew is running as well, making his hurdling debut, and I think Shakin Poursois will win. He's even money. I think he'll win. I think they got the tactics wrong at Cheltenham in hindsight, and just the railway fences down the back. Sean will be able to tell you about this. It's a brilliant spectacle. The 2 miles of speed at Cheltenham, and the 3 fences down the back coming to you at speed. I think racing it'll be showcased. It's been showcased at its worst to some respects this week. I think tomorrow it'll be showcased at its best.
All right, Johnny, look, we're going to take a quick break and we'll talk to Sean Flanagan next.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
Okay, it's part 2 this week of Friday Night Racing. I'm delighted to say Sean Flanagan is with us. Oh, his line has just dropped there. Johnny is with us, though. We'll get to...
Me again.
Yeah, exactly. You're back for more.
Where is Sean gone? He's outside. He's outside. I think his grandmother wants to hog all the limelight here, because his grandmother is having her 100th birthday, and I believe he's outside the celebrations at the moment, and he's obviously lost his line again.
There you go. It's a slightly dodgy connection, but we'll get it back in just a second. We were going to talk about his... He's obviously off injured at the moment, but he had a fairly sensational year. It's the impact that coming into studio here has. Everybody tends to have the best 5-6 months of their career immediately after coming into studio to join us.
Well, yeah. Sometimes it works out like that. Yeah, he was suffering. I think he was schooling a horse there.
There we go.
Is he back?
Yes, I think so. Can you hear us, Sean?
Yeah, back loud and clear.
Good afternoon to you. As Johnny's blown your cover there. You're at your granny's 100th.
100th, yeah. Just I came down to near us here, so we'll go in and say hello. So it's mighty to still have her around the disco on, yeah.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Unreal, yeah. She's a mighty woman now. She's 14 kids. She's fair one to still be going.
Wow. And any interest in the horses like before you?
None whatsoever. And fair play. Then when I got going, she'd sit up and watch the old racing on the TV and loved it, and still loves it. She'd watch the racing away. She's mad about it, yeah. That's
class. Listen, obviously just want to wish you very well with your recovery. How are you getting on at the moment? You're off injured.
Cheers, yeah. Yeah, look, getting their way. You know, when I went in originally after getting the fall, it was kind of 6-8 weeks was what Dr. Kenny thought that I'd be. Whilst he's still very happy with the way everything is coming along, I was back with him last Tuesday, and he kind of alluded to more 8 weeks than 6, and so he didn't really give me a date. He kind of said, go away and get your physio and start getting a bit of movement and what have you. And we're going back to him in 2 weeks' time. So I'll know where we are then. But for me, I suppose I want to be back riding for Christmas, and if Paddy thinks that's the viable option, then we'll definitely be back for Christmas. But I'll be trying hard to be back anyway, you know.
Are you a good patient?
Definitely improving with time. Definitely improving with time, you know. When it was just me and the wife, I was a bad patient, and now 2 kids, they just take your mind off it, and you know, I get out and about and I go to the yards and say hello and annoy people, and I'm getting a lot better. Yeah. And
in terms of movement, it was a couple of vertebrae you damaged. So is it close enough to be in full range of motion at the moment? What's it like?
Yeah, no, I'm full range of motion. Perfect, actually, that way. I wouldn't be a painkiller man. I don't take painkillers at all. And, you know, for that reason, I know my limitations as regarding doing too much a day. Like, if you fill up on painkillers and go off and do a day's pottering about and seeing people, and when you get home that evening, you're crippled. So I kind of try keep it fairly consistent as regarding pain level. But if you drive too much in a day, or if you walk around too much in a day, you'd know that evening whether you've done that too much or not, you know. But generally it's coming along quite well. I've been down to Galway, to Butler's now a couple of times, and I've been to another physio friend of mine, Paul Harrington, and both of those have been working away on me quite well, and I'm happy enough with the way it's coming on, you know.
Was it just a philosophical decision to stay away from painkillers? Like, because it's obviously...
I'm wondering that as well, Ger.
Yeah, it's a massive story in sport, you know, the whole medicalisation of sport and the stuff that people put their bodies through, and then you meet people who are in their 30s and early 40s and they're absolutely wrecked. They took a lot of painkillers, you know?
Yeah, no, I just and there was no real particular kick-off start for that reason. I don't know why. I tell you, it's a simple little thing. I broke my arm a good while ago. That's 10 years ago, I don't know, and I got it operated on, and it was probably 2 days out of hospital, and I had plenty of painkillers anyway, and I was happy enough. And I went out the back, it was the middle of the winter, I went out the back to get a bucket of coal, and I carried it out in my not broken hand and put down the bucket and filled it up with coal and picked it up with the broken one, because sure, I was so doped on painkillers. There was no pain, lifted off the ground. Well, there was pain after that. So I just initially after that, then I maintained that if you go out in the day, get up in the morning, take a lot of painkillers, pot it around for the evening until evening time, you've done too much. If you're sore, you do less. So like literally, I've come out of the hospital, they've gave me a stack of painkillers, said take 3 or 4 a couple of times a day or whatever it was. Going to bed that night, I took one, and the second night going to bed, I took one, and after that, that was it.
Right.
I haven't taken any more. I just think you do too much. I'd rather be not moving than moving around and then twice as sore the next day, you know.
And you just want to listen to your body.
Basically, listen to your body. Yeah, that's the best way of saying it. Yeah.
Yeah, Johnny, you're hepped up on painkillers with your broken ankle at the moment.
I'm like completely the opposite, Sean. I'm like, gimme, you know, and I'm not even that sore, you know. Like, I never heard of this Solpadol before, but it's mild pain at night and it's kind of hard to sleep, but you should listen to what Sean is saying there, because I think your pain threshold should probably be on the upper end rather than the lower. But I'm just a wimp, and I've never been to, like, I've never had any problems at all. Now I have a broken ankle, and I'll be going back to the chemist, I think, you know. But listen to Sean. That's all I'm saying.
Now I'd be all again painkillers in that sense, but if I have 10 pints now to wake up with a headache now, I go for the Salfordine tuna.
Man after my own heart.
Yeah.
Listen, we had you in studio, I think it was the summer 2020, and since then you've just been flying it. You had your first winner at Cheltenham. Maybe that's a good thing to kick the racing conversation off properly here. Really unfortunate that there was nobody there, but I suspect at the same time, in your own head, it was as if there was 1 million people there. Can you remember the race? What do you remember about the race, and how did it go for you?
Yeah, I remember it. I won't forget it for a while. Funny, we were in the room the night before, and there's a cup of stare, and we're chatting away about it, and we actually alluded to the fact that, Jesus, imagine if you'd actually ridden your first winner at Cheltenham and there's nobody there, you know. And the buzz I got now up the hill past the winning post now, if it's much better than that with people there now, I'd say it must be some buzz, but there could have been 50,000 people there, or 5, or nobody, and to me it all felt the very same. It was I jumped out. It was very hard to fancy him. He was ages one, like, you know, it was very hard to fancy him. His form was okay. He'd ran on softer ground. He hadn't ran on nicer ground only once, and it was kind of half-tailing off. His form was half-tailing off at the time, and he ran okay. You know, we've gone there hopeful of a good run. Now, me being hopeful of a good run, I was thinking get a clear run around. God, I'm sure if I finished 5th or 6th, 4th or 5th, it'd be mighty. You know, it'd be a great run out of him, and we'd have a grand bit of a horse going forward. We worked him in school, scoped him a couple of days beforehand, and Noel just said, this lad is flying, and he has a right chance, you know. I kind of thought, yeah, he does. Sure, he probably has a chance to run a big race without threatening the judge, really, you know. And I've got into a grand posse in the middle of him there, absolutely bursted the 4th last hurdle out of the ground, and then I got into a pocket that I couldn't get out of, and I was down the hill thinking, you know, there was literally a wall of horses. I could go nowhere. Jumped the 2nd last, and I was actually very surprised how close the leaders were to me. There was a wall of horses, and I didn't know was there horses in front of those horses or horses. You know, all I could see was just a line of horses. I couldn't see any more than that. And so when I jumped 2nd last and round the bend straight, and it all started to unfold a bit in front of me, and I started to see gaps. The gaps, I wasn't far off the leaders at all, you know, and he's gone down and jumped the last well, and he's galloped away to the line, you know, and he's obviously come back then from Cheltenham, gone to Fairyhouse and won there, and then gone to Punchestown and won there. Like, so now when you look back on it, sure, he was a moral certainty in a Fred Winter. Yeah,
and that's the thing. It's like it kind of comes of age at Cheltenham when people least expect it, particularly given the price at 80 to 1. Just as a matter of interest, when you see the gaps in front of you, do you know how much horse you have left? Is that the point that you start to go, ooh, this is going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I not that I'd be pessimistic. I wouldn't be a pessimistic fella, but when you're in Cheltenham and you're riding something that's 80 to 1, and you have all these other horses around you that have been spoke up and talked up and this and that and the other, like when the gaps opened up and I gave him a nudge and he quickened, and then I gave another, she quickened again. I was kind of thinking, Jesus, is this really going this smoothly, you know? But I suppose it was 100 yards from the line before I really said, this is actually, this lad's going to win. Do you know, that kind of a way? Yeah. But in hindsight, looking back on it, like I probably realistically thought I had a very strong chance from the back of the second last.
Sean, when Robbie Benson took the penalty for Pats in the Cup final, the deciding penalty, and 3 people had missed last Sunday, he said he felt no pressure. That was to win the final. When you're riding a hot favourite that you know there's a load of money on it, there's a load of hope riding on it, like is it different to riding an 80 to 1 chance?
No, there's none of my money on it. So it doesn't bother me.
Or even the pressure of connections, we'd say, in a grade 1 or whatever, if you're riding an odds-on shot.
I would have said 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, maybe. But now, I think riding in a grade 1 is it's almost an easier race to ride in because you have a better type of horse, and generally you've all very seasoned riders, and you know they all know what's going on, and it can be and maybe it might be a more tactical race to ride at times, but they're 9 times out of 10 they're always a lot more straightforward, simple race to ride in. In comparison to a Fred Winter where there's, I don't know, 20 odd 4-year-olds climbing on top of another and you know, and going in every direction. It's very different that way, and I suppose you get into the season then the things then when you're riding long enough that a grade 1, you know, obviously they're fantastic to win them, but they can almost be easier races to ride in than competitive handicaps.
When are we going to see Jeff Kidder back?
I don't actually know. I was in the other day and had a look at him. He's happy enough. He had his run back over hurdles at Naas and just didn't really seem to get going at all. They probably went quick enough early. And he does like nice ground, you know. So whether it's a thing that maybe he just wants to kind of springtime of the year with a bit of sun in his back, maybe you might see the best of him, you know. But I don't exactly know what the plan is for him. I would have imagined Christmas, but I don't exactly know now.
Okay, that like, I don't know if you were actually in the middle of a sweet spot of winners or if that helped kind of kickstart the rest of the season for you, but you finished with 60 winners last season. There's obviously something, even just talking to you there, you're talking about the maturity, a different aspect of and now than it would have been 2 or 3 years. What's happened to you that you think that has made you a better and more successful jockey over the last couple of years?
Should look at good horses make good riders, and that's the bottom line. I'm just very lucky that I'm riding for Noel, and then off the back of that I've got riding for Henry, and started to ride a bit for Gavin Cromwell as well, and you know, pick up the odd one for other people away. Like I rode a winner for Willie Mullins in the stall this year, and when you're riding for the likes of them, it makes our life very, very easy as a rider, you know. And I'll just keep working on riding for those types of trainers. If I can manage it, I ride out a couple of days in Noel's, a couple of days in Henry's, and a couple of days in Gavin's, and that's what I do. I ride out 6 days a week, 7 some weeks, you know. And
that makes a difference in terms of your connection with them and their trust of you, your knowledge of the horses. So it just becomes this virtuous circle.
That's it, exactly, yeah. And then I suppose the fact that I've had a good season last year. It is a trend thing. Like if you have a good season, people want you. If you had a bad season, sure, people want the people that had the good season, and that's the vicious circle that it is. You know.
Well, yeah. Now that you're on the right side of it, that's great. But it's like in The Wire, they all talk about superiority sucks, because if you're not one of the lads who've been there all the time, then you don't get any hours. You can't get any hours. You never get to be a senior. So, can you look back now, in retrospect, and point to a couple of big wins that gave confidence to people who weren't giving you rides beforehand, or is there something else along the way? Was it actually just showing up 6 days a week in the right places and then being in the right place at the right time for your talent to be able to reach the point it is now?
I think so. The right place and right time is crucial, I think, in racing anyway. But like for me, I kind of thought I was banging my head a bit off a wall for a long, long time, and I did give up. And then when I went to America, when I came back from America, the persona that I kind of received when I came back, I thought was a little bit different. I'd gone out to America on a whim more than anything else, I suppose. And I was Paddy Young beat me 2 winners for the Jockey's title out there that year. And I just felt like I came back and there was a bit of a different outlook on life here. maybe from me, maybe it wasn't actually from them, maybe it was from me that had a different outlook on life, and that's when I got stuck into Harry Kelly's, and then at the right place, right time, I gave Noel a call to go up, simply because I said I'd like to be riding out a nicer type of horse.
But you made that call yourself, Sean, like that was your intuition, and you said, like, I'm going to take the bull by the horns there, like.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Jimmy Kelly is a very good friend of mine, and he said, you need to be riding out a better type of horse. And I said, right, sure, I'll give Noel Mead a ring. Literally throw the ball out there and see what happens. And I was riding, I'd say I'd ridden out there 5 or 6 mornings, and Carby broke his leg, and that was it.
Yeah, it's funny how you put yourself in position for being there in the right place at the right time. Like, like the harder I practice, the luckier I get, the Jack Nicklaus thing. And it's the same with, like, Ronaldo always talks about all the hard work, and then all of a sudden it pays off at the end, but you don't see all the other work that goes into it. So it's funny that culture is hugely important. That relationship with Noel's flying it at the moment. And just reading again, you've had winners at every track in Ireland bar 2. One is Dundalk and one is the Curragh. It looks like Noel's flat horses are pretty good, so you've got a good chance maybe getting one of the Curragh scratched off the list sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I took out the flat license there to ride at Laytown, and sure, I have it now. So
that's better than you being a pilot.
Yeah, I may start driving the boat into him now. I'd ridden the thing, of Murray's work a couple of times, and like I ride loads of work for AJ Murray, and we're good friends. And he'd bring on this flat thing, and he'd say, you don't mind sitting up on this. So I gave it a little breeze, and it's rocket up the gallop. I wouldn't, I'd say I was riding Noel's, like I'd say, well, I don't know much about flat horses, but I know that's quick, or I know that's not quick. That's literally my example of knowledge of flat riding, flat work. So I'd ridden this thing work anyway, and Adrian comes on, and he said, yeah, I have him in there on the beach now in Laytown, and he'll have plenty of weight. He went up the gallop quick anyway, so I said I might as well go and ride him.
And he won.
He won, yeah.
Nice. What's Laytown like? There were crowds at Laytown this year, right?
Crowds at Laytown, yeah. It's an amazing spectacle. It literally is, And for me, it was rolling back the clock, walking out of the weigh tent, and the smell of the burgers frying there, and it was like being back at the Pint of Pints. It was deadly, But yeah, it's a brilliant spectacle. Brilliant spectacle. Ground like cement, really, because it's washed, the sand, the bit of tide gone out off it. But for the work that goes in, I'd say to put the track there, it's a brilliant spectacle, and hopefully it continues much longer, because it is quite interesting. All
right, I want to give everybody a chance to win. We've got the where's it gone? The Irish Racing Yearbook. 5 copies of the Irish Racing Yearbook to give away. To be with the chance of winning, tell us how many winners were Irish trained at the Cheltenham Festival earlier this year. You can text us on 53106. You can leave a comment on YouTube, or if you're watching the live stream this afternoon, WhatsApp us on 0879 180 180, and you can win a copy of that. Johnny has some good stuff in it as well. Can we talk about some of the horses that are out this weekend? Definitely interested in hearing what maybe we talk about the John Durkin at Punchestown, Manila Times, Allaho, Envoy Allen. What do you think what are you looking at this weekend when you're looking at that, in terms of where the result might end up, Sean?
I was very taken by Envoy Allen the last day. Looking at him, I don't know, is he like, or string me up here now, this could be a very silly statement, but I don't know, is he a Gold Cup horse in the making? I think he could be a bit sharper than that. Like, he was
you're totally right, Sean. You're totally right.
He's so sharp, he might just have too much speed. 2.5 miles the weekend. Allaho, yes, look, he's a very, very good horse in his day, but I just don't think he's a classier man. I know he had a bit of a blip the back end of the season last year, but he seems to have that well behind him. You could nitpick away through a lot of horses there in that race now, but I think it'll take a fair while to beat him.
To beat Envoy Allen in this race, and is Manila Times, that's like, this is just a warm-up race, pardon my kind of misunderstanding, or not?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't, like, warm-up, look at but at the end of the day, it's 2.5 miles, and he was seen to his best effect over 2 miles further,
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, he's obviously a very classy horse in his own right, but I would imagine there's only one target for him, and it's not Punchestown here.
Yeah, okay. And then I did want to ask you about, so there was a big win last week. Beacon Edge won the Drinmore. I suspect you might have been on this if you weren't injured. Are you?
Yeah, I'd ridden him. Obviously, rode him in the stairs last year, and I'd ridden him in his first run over fences, which we were absolutely thrilled with. It was, I would imagine, a very, very good beginner's chasing down Ryle. And he's reversed the form with the winner on the day, and the second horse, or the third horse. The third horse was Vanillier, who's gone and won since as well. So the form of that race is ranked quite well. We did think Erlab would come on a little bit from the run that day, and he has done, and it's a big ask for any horse to go and win a Grade 1 novice chase after only having one run over fences, and I was delighted for him. He was flat to the pan early on. He's a little bit no man's land. He didn't really stay the 3 mile, we thought, over hurdles, and he's not really quick enough for 2.5. But I think over fences he probably will stay the 3 miles. But as a spectacle and all, he's jumped really, really well, and he's stayed galloping to the line really well. And I didn't pull the television down off the wall and base it off the ground, but I just left and went for a cup of tea.
I'm sure you were tempted to mildly.
Mildly. I remember watching Snow Falcon win in the Kerry National, and I broke my leg, and I had one of those cast boot strap yokes on my leg, and he passed the line. I was genuinely delighted for Johnny Moore. He's quite a good friend of mine, and I was delighted to see him riding the winner. But I did pull off the boot and go walking around to see if my leg was broken, and then put the boot back on. But yeah, it is broke, Harry. It's grand.
That's the hardest part, right? Because you've no control really over what happens next. It's like
no, exactly. And Dennis, I had a lengthy conversation with Dennis that morning. We want the best for the horses and the people that work with him. And I could be a spoiled little fella and whinge and cry because I wasn't riding him. But look, please God, I might ride him the next day. And he's an exciting horse to be looking forward to.
Yeah, and I suppose the conversation we had earlier on, it's definitely a swings and roundabout situation. Paul Carby's broken leg gave you an opportunity to get in. Your career has exploded ever since. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not like you're taken from somebody else or somebody else is taken from you. You'll get back in. Now I guess you're at a stage of your career where you're confident enough you'll be able to get back and to be as good as you were before your injury.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, I've ridden loads of winners. I must someday sit down and actually look up as to how many, but I've ridden loads of winners through other people's misfortunes as regarding falls, and whether it be on the day where they get a fall and you lep on, or down the road when someone is injured and you take the ride on their horse, and that's part and parcel, and you just take that with it as it comes, and that's all you can do.
All right, there's one other big story this week, and it's the testimony of Bryony Frost ahead of the British Horse Racing Authority. As a jockey, just reading the stuff that's coming through this week, what was your take on this story and how it's all unfolded over the last couple of months?
The honest answer to it is I don't probably know enough of the details. I have read headlines rather than an actual content on it. I've read a few of the headlines, and you'd hear a few stories going around. I fully understand something happened. Obviously, there's no denying that fact. I think the fact that it's out and broadcasted as much as it was for as long as it is, I think is probably wrong. If something happened, it should have been dealt with, and then yes, okay, if there was a repercussion for either our rider, it should have been probably put to the press then. How it got out, I don't really know, and that doesn't really matter either, because the incidents happened and they probably shouldn't have had.
Can I ask you a question? We were talking about this a little bit earlier on, and it just part of the way the story got told in the last week, and I accept the point about the leaks. Obviously, you can't have leaks in the justice system. That's fair, because you can't really fight against leaks. But now that the court case has happened and we're actually hearing it, it did seem like there was a hierarchy in the weigh room that was kind of something similar. For me, it reminded me of the Class of 92 documentary about Manchester United, where I think it was Paul Scholes who talks about the senior players when he was a younger player taking him and throwing him in one of those big industrial washing machines, and he's like, that was just the way it was, that was the culture. He kind of also didn't see anything wrong with it because he'd survived it and come through to be one of the best players of his generation. But there seemed to be one of the defences was, sure, this is just what happens. The young lads or the young girls, they're kind of not treated very well by the older people who have been there and done that. Was that your experience coming through as a youngster?
No, not treated well. No, not treated very well is the wrong wording of it. Me as a young rider coming through, I had the utmost most respect for. We'll go right back. It was Shea Barry, Tommy Tracy, Ken Whelan, Ruby, Garrity, Carberry. The utmost respect for them. If Ruby or Carberry or Shea or Tommy T came to me and said, now it mightn't be portrayed in a now. They could throw a few F's and blinds into you and tell you where you went wrong. No, and they wouldn't F and blind and leave it at that. They'd F and blind, and you've done this wrong, and you should have done this, and you should have done that. In future, do this and do that. Me as a rider going forward, I took all that on board because they are where I want to be, and I improved myself for it. And would I do that today? Probably would. I might sit a lad down and say to him today, and if he done it again tomorrow, I might sit down and say to him again. And if he done it the third time now, I probably would. We mightn't just sit him down and say to him the third time, But I think that's the way racing has worked, and that's the way racing has worked all along. And I'd like to think that that's the way racing should stay working.
So it's constructive. What you're saying is your experience of the more experienced people, they would pass on information to you. It might not always be sugar-coated, but they would certainly be. And what we're talking about here is if you were putting them in danger, as opposed to, like, they're not going to criticise if you win a race, or I guess I'm wondering, what are the examples of the type of things that they would have said to you? Was it when you kind of cut across them or caused trouble, or weren't pulling your weight somehow?
100%. Well, I'm going to say 80% of why riders will fall out is a rider not holding a straight line, or a rider going down to an obstacle and veering off a line, or under pressure down to the second last and he starts veering out and something, and that's what it's all about. Now, the other side of the coin is from in Ireland anyway. If I've gone down to second last and I've given mine a beast, if I'm a 7 pound claimer, 5 pound claimer, whatever, I've given it a beast, I've given it a really good ride tactically, and no matter who it may be, and I've not that I've outridden him, but I've given mine a good ride and I've beaten him fair and square. The older generation will come in and they might look at you a little bit like, but there will a day come in the next couple of months when they turn to you, when they get over the fact that you've beaten them, they will come to you and say, "Geez, you gave that a good ride, fair play to you." And that's what that's my outlook on it. And that's been my outlook on it for a while. Like, I'm riding 16 years now, and I've never felt like I was going to get a belt, and I've never given a belt in the weigh room, but I've gotten plenty of good dressing downs, and I've given plenty of them as well, and I think that's what it's all about.
The wider issue, Sean, here is though, like, Bryony wasn't a 17-year-old starting off. Like, Bryony was a well-established rider. So I suppose this is what Ger and I were debating before you came on, and this is my concern in terms of, if your daughter wants to become a jockey, like, and she goes into the weighing room, should she be put off by the Bryony Frost thing? Because I'm not a jockey, but like, I don't get the impression from like the likes of Rachel Blackmore, or the likes of Anya O'Connor, or the likes of Lisa O'Neill, or the jockeys coming through. Like, and I'm in the press room that's beside the weighing room in many courses in Ireland, and I get some glimpse of what's going on. And I never got a glimpse that sort of overt sexism existed. Now, maybe I'm wrong.
Oh no, I don't think it does. Not in one bit. And you see, the thing about it is, right, I fully agree with what you're saying, that Bryony is not a youngster, and which is a very valid point, because if any senior rider was to veer off a line or whatever it may be, I would say to them what I would say to somebody else. Here now, come on, and you done it, or because a senior lad would know he's after doing it, whereas a younger lad maybe generally mightn't know he's after doing what he's doing. A senior lad would know, and 85 to 90% of the time, you don't even have to go that far to say to them. They're like, "Oh, sorry, I done that. I'm sorry," and you're like, "Oh, right, grand." The other few percents, they're a bit like, well, maybe, and then they go and look at it and they come back to you, which is fine. I have done that as much to a male senior rider as I would to a female senior rider, and I think that's where the definite line needs to be. I don't think it should matter whether you're male or female. If you've done it, well, you've done it, and take your bollocking if you're going to get it. You know, that kind of a way. And as regard the sexism thing, it definitely never has come into the wearing here in Ireland. I don't think, anyway.
You're an equal opportunities bollocker, is what I'm hearing here, Sean.
Absolutely, yeah. Like if
he's given me bollockins in time as well, so I can attest to that.
You definitely deserve it, Johnny. Listen, you've been very good.
Absolutely, I have done. So.
You've been very good with your time, and I know you've got to get into your granny's party. I would hate to keep you from a 100-year-old lady's party, especially when you're probably no doubt one of the guests of honour. So thanks a million for joining us this afternoon, Sean, and continued success. We wish you all the best for your recovery. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you.
Sean Flanagan there giving us his thoughts today. That is this week's edition of Friday Night Racing and Off the Ball, brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. You can follow the Twitter account at HRI Racing, and the hashtag, as we said, is every racing moment. It is going to be a cracking weekend's racing. We'll talk about it on Saturday's show with John Duggan, and we'll be back next Friday afternoon as well. Take care.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.